Jason is convinced that I can't leave him. I am a pet he has kept for many years, with beautiful fur and a melodious voice. Sometimes, I lie by the window, yearning for the outside world, but ultimately, I lack the ability to resist hunger and cold. Later, I realize that he doesn't understand what love is. His world is selfish and narrow, and he doesn't allow anyone to shake his established theories. It's a terrifying feeling of contemplation and anger. Finally, I have firmly decided to leave. The cause of it all was at a social gathering where Jason was already 3 parts drunk. His hand rested on my waist as he cheerfully said, "Today is a rare occasion gathering with a few brothers. Let Aurora play a tune to liven things up. She's got some skill, she's currently with the provincial orchestra." It was only then that I realized why he insisted I carry the violin when we left home. The assembly consisted mostly of older men, and at his words, each one looked at me with a smile, as if appreciating a geisha. I bit my tongue, staring at the orange peel on the fruit platter, meticulously folded into a perfect curve, mere decoration. Unhappy with my response, Jason seemingly reminded but actually exerted pressure, "Aurora? Have you had too much to drink?" I instinctively shivered, looking at the orange peel in front of me, folded into a perfect curve but only serving as decoration. I hung up a smile. "No, then I'll play a piece for everyone. I hope you broad-minded gentlemen won't disdain it." Jason's mouth curved into a satisfied smile, and the gaze behind his glasses softened. "Go ahead." Melodious notes filled the air, and everyone present was soon immersed in it. Even the greasy-faced men softened under the influence of world-famous melodies. I've played Massenet's Meditation many times, often able to complete it in one go without thinking. So when a sudden memory lapse occurred, I could only skip the middle section and proceed directly to the next. This group was mostly composed of business people who lacked musical expertise, so they couldn't discern the error. Jason could, but he cared about his face and wouldn't dismantle my performance at this moment. A man in a well-tailored suit made a gesture for me to stop. The music abruptly ceased, and the man looked teasingly at Jason. Jason turned to me, a hint of anger already on his face. "Aurora, slacking off lately?" The man chuckled mockingly. "Speaking of which, I attended a performance by the provincial orchestra the day before yesterday, and I didn't see Miss Aurora there." "Jason, I know you want to boast about your girlfriend in front of us, but you can't fabricate things out of thin air. Getting into the provincial orchestra requires some real talent." Someone intervened to smooth things over, and the matter was considered settled. On the way home after it ended, Jason asked casually, "What's going on?" Knowing I couldn't hide it, I lowered my voice in a pitiful manner. "Actually, I've resigned from the provincial orchestra." "Resigned?" Jason turned to look at me sharply, recalling something. Incredulity mixed with mockery, he said, "Aurora, growing a backbone, actually dares to resign." I felt a sense of impending doom, like a guillotine hanging over my head. His judgment came in the next second. "Get out, walk back." It was deep into autumn, and I was wearing a slightly formal dress, a suit jacket draped over me. My bare legs were exposed, and I walked in 10-centimeter high heels. Jason took away my bag and phone. In this stretch of road, besides the chilling wind, there wasn't even a taxi in sight. Without the heart to turn back, I had to walk back. It was his punishment for my disobedience. My legs were numb from the cold, and the pain in my feet was unbearable. Taking off my high heels, stones scraped against the flesh of my soles, a different kind of pain. For a moment, I thought of running in any direction, as long as it wasn't by his side anymore. I had nowhere else to go, so I could only walk back home. Jason was already waiting for me. "Frozen, huh? Go take a hot bath first." Jason pulled me into the bathroom. When I came out, he held a cup of ginger soup to ward off the cold. "Don't let it cool, drink it in one go, or you might catch a cold tomorrow." I obediently took it and drank it down. He then started to blow-dry my hair, his fingers weaving through the strands. I recalled the initial times he blew-dried my hair, feeling flattered, but now only a suffocating feeling remained deep in my bones. He spoke softly, as if chatting casually. "Being willful should have its limits. How can you give up the violin? You've studied it for over a decade, didn't you aspire to make it your lifelong career?" "But..." I finally found my voice and became resolute. "I have the right to change my dreams. I want to be in control of my own life." "Change dreams? So, tell me, what do you want to do now? Do you want to shamelessly sell cosmetics in public?" Jason put away the gentle demeanor he had earlier, and his words became densely packed with thorns. "I've told you so many times, cultivate more refined hobbies. Instead, you cling to your phone every day, watching those nutrition-less videos. Now you want to go down those crooked paths. Your vision is so narrow. Is your brain all mush? He had always been like this. If I obediently listened during kind moments, he would affectionately pat my head. But once I opposed him, he would erupt in anger. Taking my phone away, he dragged me into the small second bedroom with only a small window. Standing in the doorway, against the light from the living room, he looked like a faceless devil. You've been too unruly lately. Reflect on it properly. I'll be at home. When you figure things out, knock on the door anytime. After saying that, he locked the door. In the living room, he called acquaintances from the provincial orchestra, using a tone that conveyed the frustration of dealing with a child who made decisions without understanding the consequences. He hoped to retract my resignation report. He was confident that I would plead for mercy and return to the path he had set. I sat on the floor, hugging my knees tightly. Every time I received such punishments, the entanglement of over a decade with him would replay in my mind repeatedly. After the college entrance exam, I got admitted to Pingcheng University. The first thing I did upon arriving in Pingcheng was to express gratitude to the person who had been sponsoring my education, carrying the local specialties that my grandmother specifically instructed me to bring. In a high-end office building, Jason stood by the floor-to-ceiling window making a phone call. I sat awkwardly on the sofa, tightly gripping the only clean and neat piece of clothing on my body. Glancing at the items I brought in a red plastic bag by my feet, scenes from movies depicting villagers entering the city flashed in my mind, making my face flush. After finishing the call, Jason turned around, revealing a face much younger than I had imagined. He was only 28, with a straight nose, thin lips, and eyes behind golden-rimmed glasses resembling a boat sailing alone on a night sea, exuding an air of nobility and elegance. This young man had been sponsoring me for 6 years. He sat behind his desk, hands clasped on the table, and inquired, "Aurora?" I immediately stood up, nodding deferentially. "Hello, Mr. Jason. I am Aurora. I heard that you wanted to meet me. Why? Don't you want to see me?" I hastily shook my head. "I do want to see you. I really want to thank you in person for your support. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have been able to go to high school, let alone study the violin." "Still carrying the violin, huh? How about playing a piece?" Jason looked at the violin leaning against the desk. My movements to pick up the violin were somewhat impatient. I wanted to showcase myself, to make my benefactor understand that I worked hard and diligently, not letting his kindness go to waste. Back in elementary school, a volunteer teacher named Zhang Min came to our village with a violin. During breaks, she often played for us. Seeing my interest, she taught me some basics. I learned quickly and she enthusiastically recorded a video, praising my musical talent. Not long after, Zhang Min came to my house to inquire about my situation. Raised by my grandmother without ever seeing my biological parents, I was on the verge of dropping out before even reaching junior high. Zhang Min said her friend, moved by the video of me playing the violin, wanted to sponsor my education and enable me to learn the violin. In our impoverished and remote mountain village, many children received sponsorship, but few had the opportunity to pursue a hobby like mine. Filled with gratitude, my grandmother advised me to study hard and not disappoint Mr. Jason. In junior high, I went to the town to study and officially started learning the violin. Compared to other children, I was considered a late learner, but I was more diligent than anyone else. People marveled at how well-behaved children from poor families could be. When it came time to choose a college, my former teacher Zhang Min called and suggested that I apply to Pingcheng. Pingcheng is developing well, and it's relatively close to your home. Jason is also in Pingcheng. At our last reunion, he mentioned wanting to meet you. So, I came to Pingcheng. After playing a piece, Jason applauded appreciatively. I felt a bit shy. "Mr. Jason, I won't disturb your work any longer. I'll go back to school." As I reached the door, he stopped me. "All these things you brought." Embarrassed, I quickly went back, thinking he might not like them and wanted me to take them away. But he said, "These are all dried goods. I don't know how to cook them. Can you? Someday, you can come to my place and cook." It was with this sentence that we became more familiar, gradually growing closer. My feelings toward him evolved from gratitude for a benefactor to something more complex. At the end of my freshman year, in his home, I soaked the last few dried mushrooms in water. A slightly intoxicated Jason embraced me from behind. In trembling excitement, I thought I had received the greatest favor in the world. Even a humble wildflower could be favored by a god. At that time, I didn't know that I had entered a lavishly decorated castle hiding spiderwebs in its corners, and snakes lurking in its depths. I had an extreme lack of security, with only an aging grandmother by my side, like an hourglass, life visibly slipping away. I felt lonely and scared, yearning for a solid support. In this state, for a long time, I mistook Jason's controlling nature for a sense of belonging. He occupied all my free time, strictly regulating my life, specifying when to sleep, when to wake up, when to come home, and even keeping track of when I hadn't used the restroom for a few days. He especially enjoyed accompanying me to buy groceries, eating while watching the news, urging me to soak my feet. In the evening, he would secretly check my phone, deleting all contacts with the opposite sex. Early in the morning, he disapproved of the pickled vegetables I wanted to eat, throwing them into the trash and replacing them with a sandwich he made himself. Although at times it reached an uncomfortable level, I still comforted myself with the past. So, during those initial years, I endured and complied, never losing my temper. I had never seen his angry expression after being defied. Although my self-awareness woke up late, it eventually arrived. I felt increasingly oppressed, abstractly sensing the burgeoning of my inner self, infused with new oxygen, sprouting dense flowers and grass, transforming into a fish about to swim into the sea. But Jason would always forcefully reach in, pluck out the flowers and grass, claiming they were poisonous, blocking the entrance to the sea, saying it wasn't my world. After graduating from college, he urged me to continue my studies abroad for a few years. However, this didn't make things easier for me. He frequently shuttled between domestic and foreign locations. One day, I left my phone at school and didn't respond to his messages for 2 hours. He booked the next available flight to find me. He touched my hair, implying a warning. "You'll be punished, understand?" In the past, when I made mistakes, he usually punished me by assigning study-related tasks. At that time, I didn't find it particularly concerning. But that time, he made me stand in punishment. I couldn't accept it, and we had a big argument. I stormed out, and thinking of staying in a hotel, I realized my ID was with him, given only when needed. Wanting to contact friends for temporary shelter, I realized, under his long-term intervention, I didn't have any close friends. In a foreign street, in the drizzling rain, I was dragged into an alley by some thugs and almost assaulted. Jason arrived in time to rescue me. He held me tightly, apologizing with concern, "I just wanted to protect you. The outside world is too dangerous." It sounded just like the words my grandmother used to coax me into coming home early when I was a child, saying, "Big bad wolves come out when it's dark." I believed it deeply back then. At that moment, with a torn neckline exposed to the cold wind, I was extremely scared. Although his harbor was too enclosed, I truly had no worries about food and clothing. Later, I learned that there wouldn't be big bad wolves after dark, and the world wasn't so perilous. The thug was hired by Jason to scare me. But I was still a coward. Even though I seemed to make a bold move leaving home, I regretted it the moment I stepped out. My life had no one other than Jason, and there was nothing for me to do. I had attached myself for too long, losing the ability to stand on my own. Despite coming from a humble background, I used to do chores like washing and cooking at a young age. I would climb the mountain to pick wild vegetables before dawn, argue with the troublesome men in the neighborhood, and solve many problems. However, now, I couldn't do anything. Fear of cleaning a fish, inadequacy in mopping the floor, habitually wrapping myself tightly in a bathrobe after a shower, and delegating all the chores to Jason. When there was a water leak at home, my first reaction wasn't to call the property management but to call Jason. Countless times, I wanted to step out that door, but before the shackles named Jason arrived, I would retract my steps. On the day I returned to China and joined the provincial orchestra in the spring, Jason took me to a French restaurant to celebrate and discuss future plans. "The new house is almost ready. Let's make it our marital home. Next June has an auspicious day, so let's set the wedding for that time. It would be best to have a child in the following year, preferably born in the year of the dragon. It's quite good." I nodded in silent agreement, so Jason knew I had resigned without informing him, leading to his explosive anger. In the past, when I didn't listen, he locked me up. Before I regretted my actions, physiological issues often arose. This guest room didn't have a bathroom, and I usually wouldn't protest to the extent of defying it even if I had to solve the issue anywhere. I curled up in bed and slept through the night. Just as dawn broke, my lower abdomen suddenly began to ache. I ran to the door clutching my stomach, wanting to knock on it and call Jason. My hand halted halfway. If I did this, it meant another compromise. I surveyed the surroundings, found paper and a pen on the bedside table, and on each page wrote SOS and the address. My fingers trembled slightly, each stroke a self-encouragement. I stepped on the table to reach the small window above. I extended my hand beyond the protective grill, let go, and the yellow note, like a fledgling bird taking flight, spun down in the early morning breeze. About half an hour later, the police knocked on the door. In the last few seconds of my unconsciousness due to pain, I heard them order Jason to open the guest room. Acute appendicitis. I underwent surgery as soon as I reached the hospital. When I woke up, a police officer was sitting by the hospital bed, and Jason stood by the window. Upon hearing my groans, he looked over, squinting slightly, scrutinizing me with an evaluating gaze, perhaps guessing the reason for my recent assertiveness. Before you woke up, we had a chat with your boyfriend. He said it was because of a quarrel. He impulsively locked you in the guest room. Later, in the deep of the night, he forgot to open it. Originally, he planned to open the door early, but you left a note for help. The police helped me sit up, and their voice softened a bit. Aurora, we'd like to hear your side of the story. I calmly glanced at Jason, ignoring his subtle warnings, and spoke the truth. He did it on purpose. He blamed me for resigning without telling him and locked me in the room. He would only let me out if I begged for mercy. This isn't the first time. Whenever I show any disobedience, he either locks me in a room or imposes other punishments. I used to show weakness, but not this time. I don't want to anymore, not in the future either. Aurora! Jason couldn't control a low growl. I didn't look at him, tears welled up in my eyes, and my tone became more pleading. He's very obsessive. I want to break up with him, but he will definitely harass me. Can you please help me? The time Jason imprisoned me was less than 24 hours, and there was no abuse. Unfortunately, there wasn't much legal action that could be taken against him. As for my requests, the police could only mediate and caution Jason as much as possible. A police officer handed me a business card. If he continues to harass you, feel free to call me anytime. Jason, who took over his mother's company while still in college, had been successful and prominent in Pingching at the age of 38. He cared about his reputation. He wouldn't create a scene in front of the police, solidifying descriptions like obsessive or stalker. Despite how he controlled me behind closed doors, he always presented himself as a very respectable, successful person to the public. He watched the police leave calmly, then turned around and sneered, "You're quite determined this time. It's okay. Let's make a bet. You won't survive on your own. You'll obediently come back to me." The hospital was bustling with people, each patient's bed accompanied by caregivers. Shortly after Jason and I got together, he brought his grandmother to Pingching and rented a small house for her. Over the years, she had become accustomed to it, but her legs had worsened. Not wanting to trouble her unnecessarily, I entrusted a nurse to find a caregiver for me. During my hospital stay, I arranged for a rental house through my phone. Originally, I planned to return to the rented house after being discharged and take a few days to recover before going to my grandmother's place. However, her call arrived first, urging me to come back immediately. With discomfort in my body, I went to find my grandmother. Jason was squatting on the floor massaging her legs, and she had a warm smile, a picture of filial piety. Upon seeing me, she grabbed a bright red apple from the table and threw it at my right cheek. "You ungrateful thing! How could you do such a thing?" After scolding me, she began to cough violently. Jason hurriedly poured water and comforted her. "Grandma, don't get angry. Your health is more important." He looked up at me, eyes challenging, a slight smirk on his lips. "I believe Aurora is just throwing a childish tantrum. It's fine, let her play outside. I can wait." "Silly child, you spoil her. How long have you been waiting? How old are you now?" Grandma sighed. "Jason, you go out first. I want to have a private chat with her." As Jason passed by me, he lifted his chin slightly, glanced at me sideways, and sneered. Grandma asked me why, and I tried to explain the life I had with Jason over the years. I told her how I was imprisoned, lost myself, and now only had a faint trace of my soul left. I couldn't take it anymore. I was on the verge of a breakdown, and I needed liberation. But there was a gap of several decades between me and my grandmother. She couldn't empathize. She only knew that without Jason, I would never have left the mountains. I would have dropped out, married, and had children, becoming a rough village woman instead of enjoying a life on the stage. If it weren't for Jason, she would never have lived in a big city her whole life. She remembered the rugged and muddy path in front of the house, the stench of livestock in the yard, the meager harvest under the scorching sun, the spider webs on the earthen house beams, and the clay stove with a wind bellows. These images were deeply rooted in her mind, constantly reminding her to be grateful. Grandma's words were incredibly outdated but had an incomparable persuasive power. Everyone has some issues. Is that a problem with him? It's because he cares for you, protects you, and doesn't want you to suffer. Otherwise, how could your hands be as tender as spring onions? Aurora, since you were little, Grandma told you that you should know how to repay kindness. If you find it difficult, you should have severed ties with him early on, rather than now, enjoying everything he can offer and wanting to break free. How can things be done with such reasoning? What else are you not satisfied with? I bit my pale lips, trying hard not to let tears fall. But, Grandma, I didn't know how to explain. I didn't want to be ungrateful, and this belief had always restrained me in the past. But did it mean I didn't deserve the life I wanted? Perhaps many people could understand me, but definitely not an elderly person in the twilight of life. Tears shimmered in Grandma's eyes, and she lowered her voice, speaking intimately. Aurora, a woman can't be without a man. Even if you endure some grievances, just bear with it. I won't live for many more years. What I can't bear to part with the most is you. Life is tough, and he has the ability to make you live a comfortable life. I am relieved. Jason was smoking at the door. Seeing me stumble as I left, he strongly supported me. In a triumphant tone, he said, "You're not fully recovered yet. When we get home, I'll make you soup." I pushed his hand away, holding back the words stuck in my chest. Grandma's thoughts were like an iron wall standing in front of me. The only vulnerable point I could find was the phrase, "He can make you live a comfortable life." She was worried about my future. "I'll prove it to Grandma." I said to Jason, "I'll prove that I have the ability to stand on my own and live well." Jason's face darkened in the most familiar way. He looked down at me from a superior position, as if he were looking at a worthless waste. I left without looking back. Jason didn't follow. Grandma heard the commotion and scolded, "Jason, let her go. If she doesn't reconcile with you, I don't want to see her again, even in death." I embarked on something that had been swirling in my mind for a long time, but never put into action, becoming a beauty blogger. One day, by a very chance encounter, I saw a girl with burned scars on her face doing her makeup on the high-speed train. Ignoring the scrutinizing gazes, she spent 40 minutes creating a beautiful look for herself. As the sunlight streamed in from the window, she happily looked at herself in the mirror and took pictures. In my perception, makeup had always been for others. Initially, it was Jason who guided me into makeup, and gradually, I always thought of it as a way to please others, boyfriend, friends, business partners. That girl made me understand that makeup is for oneself. It allows you to stay refined in any situation, embodying a serious attitude towards life. I asked myself if I liked playing the violin. In my childhood, I only showed a momentary interest, but it became a lifelong bond. It was the only path for me, and I had long lost my passion for it. Now, I wanted to pursue something new, something I was truly interested in and could immerse myself in, even if it didn't have an outstanding stage but carried the real essence of Aurora. The newly rented house was almost empty. I spent a few days buying things online and offline, from unboxing to decorating, cleaning to cooking. I recorded all of it and posted videos on my account, titled Daily Life of a 28-year-old Living Alone. The traffic on each video surpassed the previous one because of my peculiar arrangements. I often stepped on landmines, and I was completely clueless about housework. Cooking a meal felt like fighting a war. Many people in the comments criticized me, saying I was 28 years old and didn't know how to buy things properly. The colors were all piled up, messy. Is it that difficult to cook instant noodles? How foolish. I wasn't angry at all. In my world, there used to be only the black, white, and gray of men. Now, the imagined things became vivid, and whether they looked good or not, whether I liked them or not, all had definite answers. My number of followers broke 10,000 within a few days, growing rapidly. From the beginning, I knew that if I really developed the account, Jason would come looking for me. When he came to the door, I was still instinctively nervous. Before opening the door, I straightened my back, trying to make myself look calm and composed. He walked in like a master, surveying the living room and sarcastically commenting, "Is this the chaotic life you wanted?" Putting it online to attract attention. I calmly said, "Black and red are still red." You can't deny that I gained attention at the fastest speed. smearing your face on the ground, letting everyone attack you. Of course, you got attention. I've received many calls these days, all asking about you. Jason was annoyed. You've humiliated even me. I can tolerate your little tricks and wait, but don't go too far. You must delete those videos immediately. People around Jason knew him as the owner of a bright and delicate rose that grew in fertile soil, emitting elegance and mystery from inside out. But now, this rose had turned into a wild chrysanthemum in the mountains, resorting to any means necessary to survive. Even though I had shown such determination a few days ago, in Jason's heart, I was still a runaway pet. He believed that I would return to him sooner or later, and we were closely connected. Therefore, I couldn't do anything ugly to affect him. Jason, we have no relationship anymore. I can do whatever I want, and you have no right to intervene. I emphasized again. Jason turned a deaf ear and forcefully took my phone. When he found out I had changed the password, he grabbed my hand forcefully. Aurora, open it. I couldn't control my panic, but I just turned my head coldly. If you continue like this, I will call the police. Do you want the police to solve our problems for the second time, Jason? Jason saw me take out another phone and the business card given by the police earlier. The anger in his eyes gradually subsided, turning into an indelible gloominess. I just breathed a sigh of relief, intending to dismiss the unwelcome guest, but he had already grabbed the fruit knife from the coffee table and slashed it across his own arm. Blood gushed out from the cut, drop by drop, falling to the ground. In a calm and soothing tone, Jason said, Aurora, delete them, okay? Jason once had an incident of self-harm. A year ago, a well-known foreign band wanted me to join, and Jason was initially supportive. However, when he saw the young and handsome pianist in the band showing interest in me, he immediately expressed opposition. If I had to make the violin my career for a lifetime, I hoped to shine on this path. The band was an excellent opportunity and experience, and I didn't want to jeopardize it because of his suspicions. However, in Jason's interpretation, I had always been gentle and obedient. Why did I suddenly become so firm? He became increasingly suspicious of any connection between me and that pianist. I went to the bedroom to calm down, but he insisted on an immediate explanation. Without the key, he forcibly broke the door, injuring his hand in the process. When I opened the door, the lock was half broken, and his hand was bleeding. I was scared and softened. I had thought alone, wondering if, by persisting in defiance, Jason might do something to harm me, like the stories on TV where unrequited love leads to murder and suicide. The answer was no. Jason only considered me a completely dispensable accessory. He wouldn't do anything detrimental to himself. After all, he couldn't tolerate even a few idle talks caused by my videos. He harmed himself to protect himself, challenging my emotions and expecting me to compromise. But this time, he bet wrong. Even though the blood was shocking, I just said, Jason, I won't delete the videos. I have the right to show my life to anyone, and I can't do anything about the impact on you. That's also a fact, isn't it? Jason, as if losing a move in chess, realized that his injured arm was not achieving the desired effect. The pain on his face disappeared, and he pondered, testing, are you serious? You're only realizing it now? I took a deep breath and repeated solemnly, I am genuinely breaking up with you, regardless of the consequences. If you don't want to attract the police and neighbors, leave now. Then, I pointed to the potted plant on the TV cabinet. There's a camera there, recording everything that just happened. If you bother me again, I'll post it online. Netizens will be curious about why a 28-year-old looks like this. I don't mind telling everyone our story. It will surely attract more traffic. Do you mind? Do you dare to plot against me? Jason walked to the potted plant, pulled out the camera inside, and vented by smashing it underfoot. I watched coldly. What's the use of venting on it? It already saved everything in real time. As Jason left, he slammed the door loudly. I sat down on the floor, feeling drained. Only now did I break a sweat. There were many uncertainties just now, like whether that fruit knife would stab me. Relying on my understanding of him over the years, I speculated about his character and flaws, and I won. I would have liked to focus on managing the account and building a positive image of a peaceful life. However, it would take too long. I urgently needed to sharpen a rusty knife, even if it had only a little cutting power, it could help me strike out when necessary. I continued updating daily life videos for over a month, showcasing my shortcomings as a mature, but lacking in self-sufficiency individual. This not only became my unique traffic strategy but also served as my alarm, reminding me from a third-person perspective to never look back. As winter approached, I gradually shifted the video content towards what I truly desired. When I first appeared with a complete makeup look, it became the hottest trend for 2 months. I successfully established the character of an intriguing, chaotic yet skilled in makeup elder sister. Eager for quick success, when the first talent agency approached me, I immediately signed with them to secure a stable and increasing income. This way, I could visit my grandmother and show her my efforts and achievements. Soon, I realized that due to my lack of caution, I couldn't fulfill the contract's requirement of live streaming for 8 hours every day. Beyond those 8 hours, I had to prepare for live broadcasts, shoot and edit daily videos, and more. After a week, I was exhausted. I tried to communicate with the company, but they were adamant, claiming that if I couldn't fulfill the contract, it would be a breach, and I would have to pay compensation. I vaguely sensed something was wrong, consulted a professional lawyer, and discovered a host of hidden clauses extremely unfavorable to me. A slight misstep could result in breaching the contract and incurring millions in penalties. I had clearly been taken advantage of. As the largest snowfall since winter began fell outside my window, and I was overwhelmed, Jason sent a message, "Grandma is hospitalized. Come quickly." Grandma slipped at the entrance while trying to see the snow in the morning, and a neighbor called Jason. I stood numb outside the operating room, surrounded by silence, reminiscing about the old times with Grandma. Jason embraced me, and his voice finally became clear. "Apart from the fracture, the most serious issue is a cerebral hemorrhage. We could only send her to the nearest hospital at that time. But don't worry, the moment I got the news, I brought in the best specialist from an external hospital for the surgery. She will be fine." Amidst the immense relief, I also saw the heavy iron door from the past making a dull, ear-piercing sound, closing before my eyes again. Grandma came out of the operating room and was moved to the intensive care unit, remaining in a coma. Jason was busy running up and down, signing various documents, inquiring about various matters. My mind was a tangled mess. The small sprouts of order I had managed to cultivate in my life were suddenly hit by a storm, snapping at the waist. Although I heard the doctor's words, my emotions fluctuated drastically. I had never dealt with such a major event and, surprisingly, couldn't understand. I could only look to Jason for help, listen to his explanations, and follow his instructions on what to do. He tucked Grandma in, telling me, "How can your body handle it if you don't eat? If Grandma wakes up and sees you like this, she will be sad. You have to take care of yourself first." Holding chopsticks, I couldn't eat. He came over, sat down, and fed me porridge 1 spoonful at a time. "You haven't slept for 2 days. After you finish eating, I'll have the driver take you back to rest. Don't worry, I'm here." I shook my head, "I'm not leaving." "Then at least go back and take a shower, change your clothes." Jason called the driver to take me away. As I walked to the door in a daze, I looked back, and Jason was following the doctor's instructions, rolling up his shirt sleeves and massaging Grandma's legs. The driver didn't take me back to the house I rented, nor to the home where Jason and I had lived together. Instead, he took me to the house we had initially planned to use as our marital home. As I stepped inside, I was stunned. When we were preparing to decorate the house initially, Jason asked me what style I wanted. Excitedly, I showed him pictures I found online of a gentle and bright style. However, he immediately rejected it, saying, "Too childish, your taste is really not good." In the end, I settled for a high-grade gray-tone decoration. After all, even my choice of clothes had to align with his preferences. How could he possibly consider my suggestions? But now, the decoration of the house had unexpectedly turned into the style I had chosen at that time, full of the warm atmosphere of a young girl, with various flowers and plants on the balcony and wind chimes that sounded delightful. It seemed freshly renovated. After a quick tidy-up, I returned to the hospital. Jason was sitting in a chair outside the ward, reviewing medical records. "You deliberately had the driver take me there," I cut to the chase. Jason took my hand, sat me down, and didn't deny it. "Yes, I wanted you to see the changes I made. Last time, seeing you so determined, I've been reflecting. I admit that I, considering my age and experience compared to yours, have been intervening in your life. In these 2 months, I redecorated our marital home according to your preferences. Not only that, from now on, you can live according to your liking." For a moment, I felt a bit dazed. I had never seen Jason apologize so sincerely and promise with such an attitude. If Jason hadn't come to help when Grandma was taken to the hospital, could I quickly handle such a blow? Would I have the ability to bring in a specialist for Grandma's surgery in the shortest time possible, or would she even make it out of the operating room? Moreover, after using all the money I had on me to pay for Grandma's surgery, I would still be facing nearly $1 million in compensation for breaching the contract. Life and death were paramount matters, and money could also drive people crazy. At this crucial moment, Jason chose to demonstrate his change with practical actions. My wings were thinner than cicada wings, and it seemed I had no other choice. Aurora, let's be good from now on, Jason hugged me. Before I could speak, a nurse urgently exclaimed from inside the ward, "The patient is in danger, quickly take her to the emergency room." The surgery was successful, but Grandma, being old, couldn't withstand the postoperative suffering and passed away in a coma. I knelt beside the hospital bed, crying until I was breathless. Who could have imagined that our last meeting would end in an argument? Amidst the vastness of the universe, I was left alone. Jason embraced me, his tone full of compassion. "Aurora, don't be afraid. You still have me." Jason helped me to a chair outside the ward and handed me a cup of hot water. "Sit for a while, I'll take care of things." My limbs felt like wood, my teeth chattering. I forced myself to calm down, calling out to him, "No need, I can handle it myself." Jason stopped in his tracks, about to speak, but I interrupted him. "These days, you've done enough for me. I'll handle the rest on my own. You don't have to be strong, didn't we agree? I haven't agreed to get back together with you." I wiped away tears with my sleeve, my voice hoarse. "Don't treat me like a fool." "What do you mean? You said you specially invited an expert from another hospital for my grandmother's surgery. Is that true?" When I came in, I passed by the notice board downstairs, and there were more than 10 senior doctors' resumes posted. Dr. Zhou, who performed the surgery for my grandmother, was among them. Jason hadn't expected his lie to be so dramatically exposed. He quickly responded, "I thought you were worried, and I thought it would comfort you, make the wait less agonizing. I did try to contact better specialists, but the situation was critical. Besides, Dr. Zhou from this hospital is indeed a skilled doctor." I raised my voice, "Jason, don't try to embellish yourself. You clearly wanted me to remember your goodness, feel indebted to you, and believe that I can't do anything without you." The photo of Dr. Zhou was hanging there in plain sight. "Your lies were fabricated out of thin air. You took me for an illiterate 3-year-old to deceive." Indeed, I was disoriented. Upon receiving the news, my mind went blank. Jason silently reattached the iron chain to my neck, letting him handle everything and saying whatever he pleased. I sat beside Grandma, crying my heart out. Jason always liked to showcase his abilities and intentions in front of me, such as this time. Regardless of whether Grandma could be saved in the end, I would be grateful that he had arranged for the best doctor at the most critical moment. I would become even more aware of my incompetence, relying on Jason. Also, why do I have this huge breach of contract penalty on my shoulders? You know very well it's your trap. Jason hesitated for a second, confirming my suspicion. "You plan to use money to force me to submit to you. Conveniently, my grandmother had an accident at this time, and you must have felt like you had divine assistance, right? Caught between money and my grandmother's life and death, having never experienced such a major event, I would obediently return to your side. Yes, you did redecorate the house, but how is that any different from slapping someone and then giving them a sweet date? It was just his bait, trying to lure me back into the trap." Jason's brow gradually furrowed. My eyes were stinging badly. I struggled to hold back the tears and mocked, "In the past, whenever you saw me truly desperate, you would make a slight change to convince me to change my mind. Each time, I would be ecstatic, full of expectations, but soon after, you would revert to your old self. Even so, I never gave up envisioning a future with you. After returning to China this spring, I met with Teacher Zhang. She told me about your mother's situation. Since then, I have been completely awake. You could never truly change." In Grandma's heart, if it weren't for Teacher Zhang, who went to the village to teach back then, I wouldn't be where I am today. She is also our benefactor. After returning to China and settling into work in the spring, she insisted that I have the opportunity to invite Teacher Zhang to dinner to express gratitude. I tried to dial the number from back then and surprisingly managed to get through. The first thing Teacher Zhang said when she saw me was, "Oh my, in the past, I only knew that your facial features resembled Jason's mother when she was young. Now, even your temperament is so alike. I guess Jason has made up for some regrets." I should be grateful that time has changed, and teacher Zhang hasn't been in much contact with Jason lately. She still thought I was just a student aided by Jason, unaware that we had been together for many years. Jason never mentioned his family, and I assumed it was a painful memory he didn't want to revisit. Little did I know, my existence was built upon his hidden pain. Jason is an illegitimate child, and his mother was a successful violinist. Despite her busy schedule, she always tried to keep Jason close. Jason's most vivid childhood memories were of his mother's elegant performances on stage. He was like a little adult sitting in the audience, remembering her every expression and the thunderous applause. He was proud, his mother was perfect, the best woman in the world. Fate, however, played a cruel joke. When Jason graduated from junior high, his mother had a severe car accident on her way to his graduation ceremony. Although she survived, her right arm couldn't be saved. Jason's mother, a person who loved beauty and had pride, had to bid farewell to her beloved violin. To support Jason and continue living, she changed careers and managed quite well. However, she lived in perpetual sadness, developed depression, and, despite Jason's constant efforts to persuade her to seek treatment, she endured until Jason became an adult before choosing to end her own life. Jason's idea of supporting me originated from the video of me playing the violin that teacher Zhang sent him during casual conversation. He noticed the resemblance between my features and his mother's childhood photos, where she was standing on a spacious grassland playing the violin. Perhaps, initially, it was genuine compassion based on this connection. However, later on, his sorrow turned into obsession. He was lonely and stubborn, using his mother as a perfect template, trying to mold me into it. My hairstyle, clothing, demeanor, career, everything was shaped according to his impression of his mother. In his world, a woman should be like that. I used to believe he loved me, despite various oddities, thinking they could be gradually changed over time. Only now do I understand he never truly knew what love was. His world was selfish and narrow, not allowing anyone to challenge his fixed theories. It was a chilling feeling and anger upon reflection. I finally strengthened my resolve to leave. My love and hatred are both palpable. I genuinely loved you. I had the sincere intention of living our lives together, understanding each other, and adapting to each other. But all your tactics were just to tightly control me. You were gentle when I obeyed, harsh when I didn't. You're basically training a dog. You're a twisted pervert reveling in pain. Me, twisted? Jason's face darkened. I led you on an exceptionally correct path. I've witnessed success with my own eyes. I invested so much effort and expectation in you, guiding you step by step to where you are today, molding you into a gem like my mother. What's wrong with that? It's your honor. I clenched my fists tightly, my voice trembling with anger. I am a living person with thoughts and a soul. There are countless paths in this world, not just the one you think is right. After seeing Jason's true colors, I knew that a personality like his wouldn't understand or reflect, so I had always been thinking about how to firmly escape from him. I also always thought that over the years, he had genuinely been good to Grandma, certainly with sincerity. However, in the critical moment when Grandma was hospitalized, he didn't hesitate to lie to gain sympathy, deliberately showing me the renovation while the iron was hot. Such a person has no heart. He will always look down on and try to manipulate me. Jason struggled to contain himself but still couldn't hide his anger. Aurora, you're just being so arrogant because you're still young. But think carefully about what you are. What abilities do you have? Your grandmother is still in the morgue, a ton of things to handle. Can you manage it? You violated the contract, with nearly $1 million in compensation hanging over you. How will you compensate? You're so eager for freedom, but can you bear the cost of freedom? These questions did disrupt my plans for gradual growth, but now I wasn't as panicked and afraid as I was a few days ago. Growth is a process of struggle. I looked at him with determined eyes. If you calmly approach everything, there's always a way. This hospital is so big, so many people around, I can always find someone to advise me on how to handle a funeral. As for the breach of contract, even if it's your trap, I blame myself for lacking common sense and experience to discern it. I made a mistake and will bear it. Let the court decide how much and how to compensate. There will always be a solution. Whether it was the chill or something else, Jason's face turned pale and ugly. I had no intention of entangling with him any longer. Turning around to leave, when I heard his footsteps catching up, I slightly turned my head and calmly uttered a sentence, "Go, the farther, the better." After Jason left, I took some time to calm myself, went to the convenience store to buy sticky notes and paper, and returned to the hospital. I sought out the nurse who had been taking care of Grandma in the past few days and asked her about the procedures for handling post-mortem matters. The impact of Grandma's passing hit me completely, and as I wiped away tears, I wrote while bowing my head, "I'm okay, I'll remember. Please continue." The nurse, seeing my swollen eyes, spoke softly. After I had a clear plan, she gave me some advice. In the end, she even offered to exchange contact information with me on WeChat, telling me I could ask her anything at any time. Following the process I learned, step by step, I handled Grandma's affairs. Although she happily left that impoverished village, she often mentioned wanting to go back and settle down. So, I decided to bring Grandma's ashes back to our hometown. The last time I saw Jason was when he parked his car at the bottom of the building, leaned against it smoking, and stopped me as I returned home. "I'll take you back to your hometown, bury Grandma together. Grandma is gone. Who are you putting on this filial appearance for?" I scoffed. Jason's temper had improved a lot, and his words softened. "When you went back to take a shower and change clothes that day, Grandma had a brief moment of clarity. She asked me to take good care of you, to take good care of us." My nose suddenly felt sour. The thing I couldn't reconcile the most was leaving in anger that day. I should have stayed and discussed things patiently with her. Before Grandma passed away, she thought I was willful and unbridled, repaying kindness with ingratitude. Jason took out a tissue, wanting to wipe away my tears, but I dodged it, knowing I couldn't give him a good face. I said in a stiff tone, "Jason, we've said everything we needed to at the hospital. Why are you trying to cozy up to me now? Can I understand it as you still want to win me back? After all, at the age of 38, you can't afford to waste time. Are you afraid that after all the busyness, you'll end up lonely and helpless?" This statement was roughly accurate. Jason's eyes flickered, instantly turning from embarrassment to anger. But he was a person with high self-esteem, enjoying strategic maneuvering. He wouldn't reveal his true concerns, let alone beg for love with a wagging tail. He would always attack fiercely. "Am I afraid of being lonely and helpless? What can't I get? I just shouldn't have any illusions about you. Muck is just a lump of muck." Then quickly let go of your expectations for me. Thank goodness, you're not young anymore. Don't waste your time on me, especially not to lose your image and face for my sake, right? Ingrateful wretch. Jason glared at me resentfully. "Without you, there are many people eagerly seeking my attention." I laughed, but there are also many Auroras, wanting to live their own lives independently. Jason, full of resentment, drove away in his car. On the long-distance bus back to my hometown, I checked the back end of my video account. Due to the unresolved breach of contract issue, I had stopped updating for more than half a month. The hard-earned followers I had accumulated earlier had decreased. There were numerous private messages, mostly from fans who liked me, asking why I had stopped updating. Such a caring gesture from so many people warmed my heart instantly. I couldn't help but keep scrolling down until I reached the bottom, where I found a private message. "Aurora, I am Grandma. Neighbor Xiao, he taught me how to watch your videos. I've never seen my dear granddaughter smile so happily. Grandma was wrong, Grandma supports you. According to the timeline, it was the night before Grandma fell. She didn't know many words, wasn't good at typing, and didn't use punctuation much. She must have spent a long time writing these few sentences, eagerly hoping that I would find her after reading them. She let go of her own insistence and chose to encourage me. I covered my face and cried out loud. The courage within me felt like it had a foundation now, and I would no longer be afraid. Jason's last lie had also been exposed. Grandma probably never woke up, and even if she did, she wouldn't have said anything about matchmaking. He was a coward who couldn't even admit the fear of being abandoned. After the court's judgment, I shouldered half of the originally agreed compensation, with the rest to be paid in installments. I resumed updating my videos and chose not to hastily sign with a company, opting to do live broadcasts on my own. At first, the income was meager. I split every penny into 3 parts. Sometimes, to save money, I'd eat only 1 meal a day. I immersed myself in my work, facing a few difficulties but gradually overcoming them. The number of followers increased, and the income grew. There were also tough times, and I would call friends, arranging to go shopping or have hot pot together. My first close friend was the nurse from the hospital. Another year has passed. In a lively hot pot restaurant, snow was falling outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. She sighed, "You've really changed a lot. I remember when you cried in front of me, like a child in an adult's body. Later, when we got to know each other a bit more, you never talked about the past. I was so curious about you. I laughed heartily, clinking glasses with her and joking about it. Everything had turned into a past that we could laugh about. I was grateful that Aurora hadn't given up, tearing open a gap in the chaos. Outside, there were thunderstorms and snowstorms, but also the warmth of spring. Gains and losses, prosperity and decline all were part of life.